This video is sponsored by Squarespace. Every team can improve in some way, right? Well, I wanted to identify one transfer I think each team should try and secure in 2024 ahead of 2025. Full team drivers have their contracts up for renewal, but they are not the only people to consider. Team principals, technical directors, marketing executives, and so on. These aren't necessarily what I think will happen, and they're certainly in some cases not what I want to happen, but rationally, to me, these all make sense. Let me know what you think of mine in the comments below. Give me some of yours as well. And a huge shout out to football YouTube goat James Allcott for the idea behind this video. I'm basically copying one of his. I'll start with the least contentious and end with the one most likely to get me cancelled. Let's talk about it. Ferrari, no change. Okay, so I did lie. Okay, we're going to start boring. Ferrari, I can't identify a change I would make at all. Their driver pairing is the best, most balanced pairing on the grid. Their pit stops are top tier now. They're up there with Red Bull and McLaren. Their engine seems pretty on par with the rest and it isn't blowing up all the time anymore. And from an aero point of view, especially in the hands of Charles at the end of last season, they seem the closest to Verstappen that anyone is right now. Strategy was a big issue from Ferrari, but since Fred came in, that has somewhat been remedied. They promoted Ravin Jain to head of race strategy operations in early 2023. This guy's a genius, Oxford graduate with a first-class degree in physics. Now he's in the driving seat of strategy and things seem to be better in 2023. I know Ferrari made a bit of a reputation for themselves over recent years for being lax in strategy, and rightly so, but it seems that ship has been somewhat steadied. I don't think I'd change anything at Ferrari. I can't think of anything that I can logically put together, so we're going to move on. McLaren, no change. I lied again. Look, I'm sorry, I promise this is the last team. All the remaining 8 will have at least one change going on each. But look, McLaren are set, okay? Lando and Oscar, that's an absolutely mustard driver lineup, come on. They brought David Sanchez and Rob Marshall in from Ferrari and Red Bull respectively. Their gardening leave is done. This has significantly bolstered their senior kind of tech and operations side at McLaren. It's looking very, very promising. And then, of course, Andreas Stella has done a fantastic job since he came in, and Zach Brown is bringing in the sponsors, bringing in the revenue to that team. That leadership partnership seems to be spot on. Pit stops are great. Car performance is on a great trajectory from last season onwards. They seem the closest to Red Bull in terms of philosophy anyway, whereas Ferrari and Mercedes have to kind of go back to the drawing board to try and emulate what McLaren and Red Bull are already doing. I can't think of anything I'd change. I mean, maybe they bring Adrian Newey back. Okay, back to McLaren where he shouldn't have left in the first place, but that's not going to happen, is it? So more of the same, please, McLaren. Well done. We're back again in 2024 with the Squarespace ads, and actually, I should be wearing something different. That's right, TOMMO'S Racing Goods, my merchandise that is sold exclusively through my Squarespace website, tommosracing.com. Fully built by myself, no coding knowledge needed. Trust me, coding is the worst thing in the world. I hate it so much. But I like making things. I like making these t-shirts, right? So if you want to buy them, there's still like 40 left or something like that. So they've sold really well. Thank you to everyone who's purchased one. If you've got your own e-commerce business, perhaps you just want a portfolio to host work or just a blog, you know, to write about things, then Squarespace is the perfect place to go. It's free to set up your website. You only have to pay when you want to put it live to the rest of the world. And when that time inevitably comes around, head to squarespace.com/TommoF1 to get 10% off of your very first website or domain. Haas, Günther Steiner out. Oh. So I did start scripting this video like early last week before there was any announcement around Günther Steiner's future, because that did kind of come out of nowhere to us, the general public anyway. In fact, this was one of my early thumbnail designs for this video. So yeah, it wasn't Otmar who replaced him. That was who I was suggesting. And I did write this full section out, how I felt that Günther had taken the team as far as he could, especially him being based out of the States where the bulk of the team was in the UK in Banbury and at Maranello. And I felt like Otmar being on the market, you look at what he did with Force India, a team that was very pokey and small and over-delivered given their lack of resources, that he was the man to maybe bring them into the 21st century, you know. And Gene somewhat agreed, at least with the getting rid of Günther part anyway. And as much as I think the way he went about it from what we've heard from Günther, was very, very muggy and not good at all. Like sacking him over the phone between Christmas and New Year, not even giving him an opportunity to say bye to the team that ultimately Günther created himself with Gene's money, but it was all down to Günther. But in this post-budget cap era where the only two team principals to survive pre-budget cap to now post-budget cap is Toto and Christian, you know, I think a fresh set of eyes is probably a good thing. Now, Ayo Komatsu was not on my radar at all, but I mean, when you look at his CV, you can't help but see the similarities in terms of what's happened with, you know, McLaren and bringing Stella in, someone who's really technically built into that team, then getting the promotion and getting a chance to oversee and do it all themselves, right? I'm really interested to see how Komatsu changes that team. But outside of that, I mean, why did Haas have the worst pit stop record, for example, in 2023? What's the excuse for that? That felt like an operational thing that really Günther should have been more on top of, and maybe Komatsu will focus on that a bit more. But anyway, we can't do Günther out Otmar in because Günther's already gone. So instead, I'm going to look at a different department in Haas, which I think really needs addressing, especially since the words we've heard from both Günther and Gene since Steiner got the sack. I'm going to suggest a senior marketing appointment because it seems that part of the reason that Günther and Gene ended up separating, right, and going their separate ways is because Günther felt like the team needed a lot more investment and was not going to go anywhere without more investment. Gene felt like, given the investment he's already made and what's already there, the team should be doing better. Ultimately, differences they couldn't get past. The big boss Gene, who clearly doesn't want to sell that asset, it must be doing enough marketing good for his Haas C&C operations that he owns his businesses on the side. And Gene is a very, very rich man. He could invest if he really wanted to. He doesn't feel like it's worth it. So the next best thing is the team to generate more income themselves, and that's through marketing and sponsorships. I'm not so much suggesting someone leaves Haas because it feels like their marketing department is pretty barren as is, but they need to bring someone in who really knows what they're doing. Now, look at McLaren. Look at how they've paved the way for F1 sponsorship in recent years, right? And Zach Brown has got a lot of the credit for it, and much of that is deserved. But in the same way as Adrian Newey isn't 100% responsible for the technical innovation at Red Bull Racing, neither is Zach 100% responsible for the marketing innovation at McLaren. So I would like to propose that Haas bring in Lou McEwen from McLaren, their executive director of brand and marketing. In fact, myself and Lou had a really good chat on this very channel last launch season, link above if you want to watch that. She's great, and I think she'd be a fantastic little marketing coup for Haas, because dragging more sponsorship cash into that team seems like the only viable growth strategy if your owner is not going to invest. I mean, just take a look at Haas's website, right? Look at their partners. Now, when you take away Haas C&C, which is obviously owned by Gene, right, and Pirelli as well, because they kind of sponsor everyone, they've got like 10 sponsors total. Now, you might argue, but Tommo McLaren are a big heritage brand and they're doing a lot better than Haas, so of course they've got more sponsors. Okay, fair point. But then look at Sauber, who over recent years have been about on par, in the same kind of ballpark as Haas. And look at how many sponsors they have. Being at the front, of course, makes selling sponsorship easier. It also makes selling sponsorship more expensive because you carry a premium, and there's always going to be brands who are interested in being invested, but not necessarily at the top teams. And Sauber have been doing it, so why can't Haas? Because Günther was, in a way, right, this team isn't going to go anywhere without capital investment. Okay, James Vowles has talked about this time and time again regarding Williams. These smaller teams need to be able to try and catch up with your Scuderia Ferraris and your Mercedes AMG Petronas and your Red Bull Racing with all these big campuses. Like, a lot of these smaller teams just can't and don't operate like that. And if they want to, they need to be allowed to spend money to get there. F1 has relaxed the capex rules, so the allow is now there, but you've still got to generate the income. And when you look at the McLaren in 2017, which was the year Lou McEwen joined, by the way, and then look at it now, it's night and day. Come on, sign her up, Gene. Otherwise, you can sign yourself to mid to low field mediocrity for the rest of your tenure owning that team. And it just makes me feel like, just sell to someone else who actually wants to invest. Give your team a chance and get Lou McEwen in the doors. Alpine, Bruno Fermat out. Alpine have been all over the place as of late. You had Abiteboul out, Bukowski out, Safnauer and Alain Permain out, now Bruno Fermat in. Now, I've got nothing against Fermat, okay, he's not been in charge very long, he is interim team principal at the end of the day. Interim means temporary, he's not meant to be there for the long term. He's got no experience of running a Formula One team either. He is VP of Motorsport at Alpine. I think that's a role that probably deserves his full attention. Give the team principalness to someone else, you know. So I did a bit of searching, and again, I'm not fundamentally against bringing someone in who hasn't necessarily run a Formula One team before, because we've seen how that's worked with, again, Vowles and Stella. But I've looked down the field a little bit to someone who I think could do a really good job, because their CV is absolutely stacked. I'm going with René Rosen, who is the current team boss at Prema. In fact, Prema was co-founded by René's father, Angelo. So for sure, prying him away from his dad's team and the team his dad set up would be a challenge. But this is Renault, okay? Renault have the clout. If they really want to be serious about this team, bring in a serious team principal that you're going to back. Prema obviously huge in the junior categories, right? In fact, both Esteban and Pierre drove for Prema, so I'm sure they would co-sign bringing René back. You look at how many incredible drivers came through the ranks at Prema who made it to F1. Prema win wherever they go, be that F2, F3, F4, sports cars as well. And yes, a Prema F1 team would be very cool. That question has been asked many a time over the years, but they weren't part of the entry process bid thing that the FIA did. So I don't think that's going to happen. But I think René not being able to team boss in F1 would be a crying shame, because he's clearly very, very, very good at what he does. But the biggest thing here, whoever Alpine bring in, is that you give him the reins and let him go for it and let him own it, and don't middle manage them out of the job like I felt like they did Otmar, in my opinion anyway. Invest in the team properly, because to see a Renault fighting at the front once again is something that I think many of us have just accepted that is not going to happen. But why not? Because they're a manufacturer, the huge manufacturer. There's no excuses anymore, especially with all these celebs getting invested as well. The potential for this team is sky high, so make it happen. Racing Bulls, Jody Eggington out. At the end of the day, AlphaTauri has not delivered in these last two seasons on the potential that they clearly have, right? They're literally owned by the team that has made one of the most dominant F1 cars of all time. And there's a lot of good about that team, okay? They were the fourth best in terms of pit stops last season, which is pretty good. I think the race team in Faenza is very solid. And then with Sonoda, who just come off the back of his best season in F1 to date, and Ricciardo, who prime Ricciardo won 8 races for a reason. Like, come on, there's a lot of talent in that driver pairing. We now know ahead of 2024 that they will be fully exploiting their relationship with Red Bull to the ceiling of what is allowed within the regulations, which they should have been doing from day dot, really. I know it's easy to say in hindsight, but come on, like, Newey is the ground effect master. I don't know if it is ego, I don't know if it was just belief, but either way, it's not worked out for them. Yes, Jody Eggington did help prepare a car in 2021 that was very competitive, actually, at the front, wasn't it? That was a really good car, especially in qualifying with Pierre at the wheel. But now it seems to have fallen off. Look, I'm suggesting change because I feel like if you've got two teams, right? If you own two teams and one of them is the best team in Formula One, you need to make the most of that. So I'm kind of thinking a technical director swap. So take Jody Eggington out and put Pierre Wache in. He's current technical director at Red Bull. He's the one who, I guess, maybe brings Adrian's ideas to life, as well as his own ideas, because there is a full technical team there and it's not just Adrian Newey, of course. But look, that RB20 is pretty much already done. They're already thinking about the RB21. That's clearly a fantastic foundational car to get them to 2026, even if they don't change anything from here on out. So I would argue in the short term, there's more value of putting Pierre at Racing Bulls, maybe bringing Eggington to Red Bull Racing to kind of learn a bit there. Bring that team up and push that team forwards, bring that asset, make it more competitive, more towards the front. With all that experience, and Pierre is a genius himself, develop that team, that car, either build that asset to sell or just move it up the field and exploit the clear advantage that there is in having two teams in Formula One. Look, fundamentally, I wish Red Bull didn't own two teams, because it does bring sporting things into question, no doubt, especially if that team starts to move up the field. But I'm not thinking about that. I'm just thinking selfishly from Red Bull Racing and Racing Bull's point of view. I think putting Pierre Wache into that role makes sense. Aston Martin, Lance Stroll out. Sorry Lance, but until there's significant improvement in your consistency after 7 full seasons in Formula One, your seat's legitimacy will continue to be called into question. Look, I've spoken about this before. I think Aston Martin's 2025 WEC project is the perfect smooth transition for Lance out of F1 and into another discipline, assuming that Lance doesn't significantly step things up in 2024, which, again, I've got no evidence to show that he will. A great driver on his day, but that day doesn't come anywhere near often enough. Look, by the end of 24, he'll have had 8 full seasons in F1. He'd have proven he's not World Drivers' Championship material, but there's plenty of F1 drivers, ex-F1 drivers, who've gone into endurance racing and rejuvenated their names and their careers, right? Think Brendan Hartley for Toyota. Think Antonio Giovinazzi for Ferrari, right? I don't think those two drivers are any better than Lance. I don't. I think Lance is very capable, just not anywhere near consistently enough. And he can't lead that Aston Martin F1 team long term, especially if Fernando is close to retirement. This F1 generation right now is absolutely unreal. You've got Verstappen, Hamilton, Leclerc, Norris, Russell, Alonso is his teammate, etc, etc. Like, I can't begrudge Lance for not being able to keep up with them, but that is the standard. That's the new standard in Formula One, and Lance isn't there, and moving out of that team seems more likely than ever with the WEC project starting in 2025. So as for a replacement, I do think from Aston Martin's point of view, it's worth rolling the dice on their reserve driver, their young F2 champion, junior Felipe Drugovich. He's not proven with F1 experience, but by 2025, he'll have even more testing, even more FP1s, even more reserve driver responsibility under his helmet. He'll know that team better than ever, and you won't really be able to consider him like a fresh out the box rookie, because he will be carrying a lot of experience into that team. Yes, it took him 3 seasons to win F2, but when he did win it in 2022, he won by over 100 points against a field of pretty significant names: Tao Pourchaire, Liam Lawson, Logan Sargent, Ayumu Iwasa, Jack Doohan, Frederick Vesti, Dennis Hauger. He beat them all. Look, if you give this young driver an opportunity, someone they don't have to pay loads of money to sign either, because he's already part of their academy, I think he could really cook. Not to mention his Brazilian nationality would be a real coup to a fan base that has lacked representation in F1 since Felipe Massa retired at the end of 2017. Fernando and Felipe would be a great little combo. Felipe could learn a lot from Fernando Alonso. He's the one driver above all you could learn something from, right? Aston Martin had a great start last year, stumbled. By the end of 2023, it was getting better again. You know, Fernando holding on for that podium in Brazil, for example. Like, Lance Stroll's not the guy, but Felipe Drugovich could be the guy. So I think give him a chance. Fernando's still doing bits right now, so it's not an immediate issue, but at least give Felipe a chance. Come on. Sauber, Bottas and Zhou out. We've still got 2 more seasons until Audi take over that Himmel-based team fully. But with 14 drivers' contracts up at the end of this season, you got to do some shuffling around, because Bottas and Zhou, nice guys, they've not shown me enough. It's always difficult to say how much of it is the car, because the car's clearly lacked, and Valtteri delivered at the start of 2022 for sure, and in moments in 2023 he had the edge on Zhou both seasons, but not by enough, because Zhou's good, but he's not generationally good. When you look at what Alex Albon's been able to do in that Williams and really showcase a level that's made a lot of other teams stand up and take notice, Bottas and Zhou have not done that. They've not replicated that. I think Charles Leclerc, when he was at Sauber back in the day, 2018, came in and just dicked on his teammate, delivered incredible performances and got the jump to Ferrari literally 1 season after. Bottas is more complete, Zhou is younger and has more theoretical room to grow. Look, I just don't think they're the two guys going forward, and I don't think Audi are going to be considering them as part of their future. So if I was Audi, what would I be pursuing? Well, Nico Hülkenberg is the first name. We already know Audi want him, and I think they're right to want him. I think he's proven a lot of people wrong since he came back in. His Q3 rate in that Haas, like 8 times in 22 races, like, it's really good. I think he can still do it in a more competitive team, and he can build that team up, no question. Haas chose to extend his contract for an extra year. We know conversations with Sauber have already happened. There were talks. I know Andreas Seidel very well from the Porsche and F1 days. We get on well, that's no secret. There were talks, there was interest. At the end of the day, it did not happen. Look, Haas are gonna struggle to keep hold of him because he did a really fantastic job in what was a very difficult car. Again, Hulk was able to show a level of quality and performance in a car that was worse than the Sauber than Bottas and Joe were. You know what I mean? So I'm saying Hülkenberg comes in for Bottas. But then what about Joe? Well, there is a young Ferrari driver who made a pretty good impression in F2 in 2023, is tipped by many people to be the one to win it all in 2024. I'm of course talking about Ollie Bearman. If Ollie delivers on his potential this year, I think from Ferrari's point of view, and I also think from Sauber, Audi's point of view, bringing Ollie into their team, not Haas, because it's looking more likely it would be Haas given his FP1 runouts with Haas. Bringing him into Sauber, I think works for everyone more, right? Again, Sauber are proven. It's a team that Charles Leclerc came in and did bits in. They've done it before. Haas seemed like a bit more of a risky punt. You look at what happened with Mick Schumacher. Was that Haas stunt in his development? Would it be different with Komatsu in charge now? Maybe, but I think Sauber is the team I would feel safer giving my junior driver to than Haas. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. But also, there's been lots of talk for a long time about Sainz and Audi, right? So what I'm suggesting here is that Sauber take on Bearman, get a good couple of years out of him, and then if the time comes where Ferrari want Bearman, they can do a swap. They can have some kind of swap deal. Sainz goes to Sauber, which would then be Audi. Bearman, Ferrari, Bosch, job done. Williams, Sargent out. Look, I do really hope Logan steps on in 2024. I really do. But if I have to identify a weak link in that team right now, objectively it has to be him. Vowles is great, Alex is killing it, Pat Fry's just come in as a technical lead now as well to hopefully push that team forward. There's a lot of reasons to be optimistic about Williams going forward. And if Logan can turn it around in 2024, that's huge for them because, again, as a junior driver, they already own him, okay? They've not had to buy him in from elsewhere. He's young, he's American, which will start to pay dividends when they move up the field because an American fighting at the back is not going to invigorate the American audience like someone fighting at the front. Of course not. And you look at Sargent's track record, how close he was to Porsche and Piastri in F3. Come on, this kid's got talent and I really hope they can unlock it. But right now, all we've got to go on is his first season and he did get absolutely slapped by Albon. By mid-season in 2024, Williams should both know where they stand with Alex, if they've got a chance of keeping him, and where they stand with Logan Sargent, how much his performances have converged, right? Because it's going to be a tough ordeal to try and keep Alex on, because there's clearly a lot of interest, right? Because I am suggesting that Logan does get replaced next year, but I think from Williams' point of view, again, this is not a prediction, this is what I think Williams should do, is look at another driver on the grid who brings a lot of sponsor income, who's on pretty unsteady ground with his current team, but could jump into that team and I think do a really good job towards the tail end of his career. If Logan doesn't step up, I think he should be going for Checo. I've said this before. I literally predicted this in my last predictions. This is not a prediction because I won't put this in my predictions because I don't think this is actually going to happen, but I think it makes sense. I more don't think it's going to happen because I don't think Checo would take the jump down. I don't think he wants another project. I think it was Red Bull or bust. From Williams' point of view, all of that sponsor income that comes in helps, build up that capital expenditure budget. But also I think Alex would back himself to beat Checo. I think think Alex would beat Checo. Not by much, but I think he would. So Alex can still feel confident he's leading that team, but also Alex would know that all of a sudden there's all this investment coming in that can help build up that team. I'm sure undoubtedly he'd love to win with Williams in the same way Lando would love to win with McLaren, but McLaren look a lot closer to winning than Williams do right now. And maybe that would be enough to tempt Alex to stay, you know? Maybe. Williams need to sell him a dream to stay, and maybe this is that dream. Albon, Perez, Williams. That would be sick. I'd be so down for that. Mercedes, Toto Wolff out. Toto Wolff out. Look, let me explain, okay? George and Lewis are locked in for another couple of years. James Allison's back in a technical role. So that's fine. Okay, I think there are issues with Russell and Hamilton being together in the same car where they're so close. It's a difficult situation to manage because you want both of them, but they're two alphas in a team. It is difficult. But since Mercedes wobble, right, into this new era of F1, we haven't seen the measured Toto that we've been accustomed to seeing over recent years when they were dominating, right? And I was very annoyed at his little outburst in Vegas, okay? I did my little video about it. I really touched a nerve because I felt it was disingenuous, but also it wasn't a team principal speaking, it was a team owner speaking, which he is a 1/3 team owner at Mercedes, who's just renewed his contract for another 3 years as team principal, kind of like the Obama, putting the medal on Obama meme. I don't think that is the role for him. Look at McLaren, look at Zach and Andreas. Zach is big picture, sponsorship, visual identity of that team. Andreas is the one doing the team principal, the dirty work as team principal, almost the unglamorous work as team principal. I think Mercedes should be opting for a similar structure. Give Toto that more senior role and bring someone else in to be that team principal. Someone, maybe as Gene has said, a more engineering focused team principal. Because when you've got a team principal who also is asset-wise a billionaire because of his 1/3 stake in the team, there's going to be a degree of, I don't know if this was a hot topic recently, conflict of interest. Just an internal conflict of interest within Toto. What's good from a team principal point of view? Like when Fred was really annoyed in Vegas, right, and spoke out, and he really stood up as a team principal. Whereas I think Toto, that did not come across well at all, the way he handled that, because he should have been very much on Fred's side. He just threw his toys out the pram, right? It was petulant, and it still annoys me to this day, clearly. And look, when James Vowles left for Williams, the quote from Toto was something along the lines of, you know, if James wanted to get a promotion here, he would have to take my job. So he went to Williams, does a couple of seasons at Williams, and then takes your job at Mercedes. I'm suggesting James Vowles comes in. James has set some really great foundations at Williams, and I'd love him to stay, but I'm thinking Mercedes' point of view, selfishly, bring him back. He knows that team. He was at that team since 2001, since they were BAR. Williams just announced the extension of their Mercedes engine supply from 2026 onwards as well, so that relationship is as close as ever. Let Toto be the business person that he is, and let James Vowles be the team principal that is clearly a role he was like born to do, right? But bring him back to Mercedes. I just think that's a more appropriate position for Toto and for James. The one alternative shout I was thinking was James Allison. Again, engineering mind, but in the team principal role. But I mean, Mercedes has got a long way to go. I think it makes sense for James to just knuckle down, focus in on developing that W15, W16. Allison's a cool idea on paper, but it can go one or two ways. You got like the Mattia Binotto effect, a great technical mind, but was he cut out for that leadership? I'm not so sure that's the job for Allison, but it's definitely the job for Vowles. Red Bull, Sergio Perez out. Final change, and we are at Red Bull. Right, so just with Sargent, I would love nothing more than Checo to turn it around. Imagine if Checo won the World Drivers' Championship. Imagine the scenes. That would be incredible. Of the drivers in the top kind of 4 teams, Checo is the one I'd like to see win a Drivers' Championship the most. Because it would just be amazing, especially given his struggles as well. A phoenix from the ashes, someone who struggled and then bounced back. But I can't make that argument because there is no evidence to suggest that is going to happen. If anything, it's not going to get any better. I don't see how it gets any better than it has been, his gap relative to Max, right? It could even get worse, which Checo really had a bad 2023. Let's not sugarcoat it, because you can't sugarcoat it. It was bad. He made so many mistakes. He was out of Q3 so many more times. His average qualifying position was so bad. It wasn't just because he wasn't close to Max. It's just he struggled in that car to overtake, to qualify, to do anything. I see no straws to clutch, and ultimately he's too far off of Max, okay? You can be too close to your teammate, a la Russell and Hamilton tripping over each other. Think of Hamilton Alonso in McLaren 2007, when Kimi just took the title, even though really it should have been Hamilton or Alonso. But then also you can be too far from your teammate, where, you know, Max will potentially in 24, you know, if everyone else gets closer, you know, he'll be fighting on his own, potentially. You know, Sainz and Leclerc, or Norris and Piastri, or Lewis and George, like fighting in pairs and able to kind of double team Max. Those two-pronged attacks are something Red Bull should be worried about. So what should they do about it? Ricciardo, Lawson, Tsunoda, in that order, seem to be the next three drivers in line for that seat. I'm trying to make a decision here as Christian Horner, as the operator, owner of that team. What is the best choice long term? And there is a name that is none of those three that is coming to mind. Of those three, Ricciardo, I would probably be happy with. I am assuming he will beat Yuki in 2024. I am assuming we will see a close to the best version of Daniel Ricciardo. I think Ricciardo at his best back in the Red Bull would be where Sainz is relative to Leclerc. I think a couple of tenths qualifying pace to Verstappen. But that's making a lot of assumptions. That's assuming that Yuki doesn't beat Ricciardo. Like, we don't know. So I would go for a driver who has been on some crazy form as of recent, was born in the UK, and is not Lando Norris. If I was Christian, I'd bring Albon back in 25. I would. Do I think this will happen? No. Do I want this to happen? Hell no. But does it rationally tick a lot of boxes? Yes, it just does. Albon is almost 7 years younger than Ricciardo. Alex is coming into his prime. He's not even 28 yet. He'll be 28 soon. Whereas Ricciardo, it's a lot of unknowns, okay? It's a lot of unknowns. Both, I think, are pretty equally motivated to get back in a Red Bull. I know Alex hasn't publicly said that, but he's alluded to, he feels like he'd do a much better job now if he went back, and he's a very different driver to who he was then, all that. We obviously know Ricciardo is very motivated, but I think Alex would be motivated by that as well. Ricciardo is huge commercially, a pull that Alex doesn't have, but Alex's tyre, Red Bull is majority tyre owned. I think for that market, I think an Alex Albon doing bits ticked a lot of boxes for upper management at Red Bull, and to see him come back, I think they would be very pleased by that. There's an additional connection. Even like Monsoon Valley, who were sponsoring Alex last year, is, I think, owned by the Red Bull owner's son or something. So there was still a connection there up until really recently. I don't think Alex would be close enough to give Max a real challenge week in, week out, but I think he would be closer, and I think it would help Red Bull from a constructor's point of view. The fan in me doesn't want this. I'd rather see him build up a Williams, or say go to an Aston Martin and build up that project as kind of a lead driver, ideally. Of course, that's what I'd like to see, right? I want to see him getting the glory, and he won't alongside Max at Red Bull. And I don't rationally think Max would batter him like he did last time, but I'm scared because I could be wrong, and I've been wrong many a time before, as you well know. I still don't think this is going to happen, but who knows? Honestly, who knows? Like, maybe. But anyway, let me know what you thought of my one pick per team. Sometimes none, sometimes two picks per team, whatever. In the comments below. Shout out again to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. I hope you enjoyed this one. My name's Tommo. Thanks again. Have a good one. Ta-da.